most business transactions were being conducted by men. That was just the nature of that society, okay? And in that context, sometimes even if women were present, they weren't paying attention. They weren't part of the deal. So now there's a court ruling and you're bringing a woman who's saying, yeah, I was there, I think that's what they said, or she gets nervous. So Allah said, women, if they, in a sense, understood, if they don't have the background, there should be another one to help them in case they get confused. Some of our non-Muslim colleagues ask about why the Quran says that two women's testimony is equal to one man's testimony. So I'll say a few things about that. Let's start with our Hadith tradition. In our Hadith tradition, one of the most learned from a Hadith come from Aisha radiallahu anha, who is one woman, and she's testifying that she heard the Prophet say, and especially Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, in situations where there's nobody else around, it's just her and her husband, right? So if the Muslims thought that the testimony of a woman across the board is only half that of a man, then we would have to apply that to the mother of the believers too, and like Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. So that would be a problem. In our Hadith tradition, there are women that were teaching scholars Hadith also, not just Sahabiyat, other women. There's a list of them. Those of you that are interested, there's a book called Al-Muhaddithat. It's been translated into English also by the author himself, Dr. Akram Nadwi. He collects a list of, I think, 2,500 Islamic scholars, women across Islamic history, whose testimony in report collection is something that's part of our tradition, right? So the idea that somehow Muslims thought that women's testimony is half that of a man, it doesn't hold true historically. But that still doesn't answer the question, why is that in the Quran? What's in the Quran is actually a few things. In the Quran, a woman comes to the Prophet ﷺ and complains that my husband does this, this, and this. Okay? She complains about her husband. And the Quran came to her defense. The Quran didn't come to the Prophet ﷺ and say, wait, if a woman comes to you, tell her to bring one more woman before she testifies to anything. You don't see that in the Quran. You actually see a one woman saying something and it's completely acceptable. In fact, acceptable to Allah Himself. Acceptable to Allah Himself. So already within the Quran, you're seeing that this is not a consistent rule. Now let's zoom in on the ayah itself. The ayah is actually talking about witness intimidation. It's talking about two things, witness intimidation, and it's talking about prior knowledge. So what happened in Arabian society, you might know the vast majority of people were not literate. The vast majority of people did not know how to write and read and write. That was a minority. And in that ayah, in that same ayah, this is the longest ayah of the Quran, in that ayah, Allah made it a responsibility for the few people who know how to read and write to show up when a loan document is being signed so they can take dictation from both sides. It's kind of like jury duty, right? So it's because the citizen's responsibility to provide this public service, right? And it's the same, or it's not like being drafted in the military, but being drafted for public service because you're one of the few people that is able to provide this public service. Okay, فَلْيَكْتُبْ مِمَّا عَلَّمَهُ اللَّهُ. From what Allah has taught them, that person should document. Fine. So now we're talking about the minority situation where only some people are capable of documenting these kinds of things. Now, the next component of that is most business transactions were being conducted by men. That was just the nature of that society, okay? And in that context, sometimes even if women were present, they weren't paying attention. They weren't part of the deal. So now there's a court ruling and you're bringing a woman who's saying, yeah, I was there, I think that's what they said, or she gets nervous. So Allah said, women, if they, in a sense, understood, if they don't have the background, there should be another one to help them in case they get confused. Now the other thing is, the ayah never said if they forget. It didn't say أَن تَنْسَى إِحْدَاهُمَا فَتُذَكِّرَ إِحْدَاهُمَا الْأُخْرَى. It said أَن تَضِلَّ إِحْدَاهُمَا. If one gets confused, if one gets lost, the other can remind her. So being confused is not the same as being forgetful. Here's another interesting component, witness intimidation. Tadilla can also be used as a woman's being told, hey, if you testify, then it's not going to be good for you. You know what I'll do, or you know what can happen to you. So because they were in a greater threat, or when you leave this place, you'll see what's going to happen. So Allah essentially kind of provided somewhat of a cover by having two women come and testify in those kinds of situations, meaning two women are being pulled into court. If you can't just pull one woman into court, two have to come. If you can't come up with two, then don't bother them. Right? So it's easier to draft men into get a letter that they have to have a court appearance, and it's twice as hard for a woman to be called into a court appearance, actually. So that's the original context of the ayah in question. It can, in some societies, yeah, I think in some societies it can. And I think its application can be used in the context of witness intimidation. You know, you have, for example, what do you call those, restraining orders? Right, restraining orders, right? It's usually not men that are getting restraining orders from women. That happens too, but it's most of the time women getting restraining orders from men, right? It's the other way around. So there's a physical danger. It was an interview I was listening to from a police officer, a female police officer, who carries extra weapons, right? She has like a knife in her sock, and she has like all kinds of stuff. And she was like, look, the fact of the matter is, as a female as the female of the species, I'm walking around next to people that are potentially capable of killing me with their bare hands. Right? So like there's a biological fact to the domination of the male over the female, physically speaking, right? So that intimidation is a reality in society. It's not something that can be ignored. You know, as much as we want to pretend men and women are equal in every way, that's just pretend. There are some things in which women are given an advantage, other things men are given an advantage. And clearly a physical advantage is there. Now, if you want to bring up Vanessa Williams as an example to beat me up, you can, but the exception proves the rule, right? I hope you guys enjoyed that video clip. My team and I have been working tirelessly to try to create as many resources for Muslims to give them first steps in understanding the Quran, all the way to the point where they can have a deep, profound understanding of the Quran. We are students of the Quran ourselves, and we want you to be students of the Quran alongside us. Join us for this journey on BayyinahTV.com, where thousands of hours of work have already been put in. And don't be intimidated, it's step by step by step, so you can make learning the Quran a part of your lifestyle. There's lots of stuff available on YouTube, but it's all over the place. If you want an organized approach to studying the Quran beginning to end for yourself, your kids, your family, and even among peers, that would be the way to go. Sign up for BayyinahTV.com.